Welcome to video number 9 for Ctrl Shift Enter Mastering Excel Array Formulas. Hey, we're in the workbook Array Formula DVD book. Start on the sheets topics. Hey, first 8 videos we've been talking about all the different aspects and elements that go into creating array formulas. And in this video we got to talk about the amazing SUMPRODUCT function. Now I'm going to go ahead and click on this link on the topic sheet and jump to sheet number 9. Now, as I've been doing in the last couple of videos, here's kind of a laundry list of all of the aspects and elements of array formulas that we've seen through the first 8 videos. If I were taking notes, this is what I would be writing down as the concepts of what I've learned so far. Video number 9, we've got to talk about the amazing SUMPRODUCT function. Now, we've already seen that SUMPRODUCT function is amazing because it can handle array calculations without that special keystroke Ctrl Shift Enter. And we've seen, or we will by the end of this video series, see that this is one of 4 functions: the SUMPRODUCT, index, aggregate, and lookup function that can all handle array calculations without that Ctrl Shift Enter special keystroke. Now, our first example, I just want to remind us of what we've used SUMPRODUCT for already in this video series. Now, here's our formula go. We have a single cell formula to calculate rounded total sales given units column and price per unit column. So here we have units and price per column. We do not want an extra helper column with the round function, this cell times this cell, comma 2, and then copy it down, and then total. We want a single cell formula. So no problem. I think this is the third time we've seen the SUMPRODUCT do this, SUMPRODUCT. And there's that array argument. Now, there's a bunch of arrays in our next example. We'll see how to use a bunch of them. But again, we're just using the array argument here because it will handle the array calculation without Ctrl Shift Enter. Then we'll use the sum part of SUMPRODUCT to add the result. So what do? Round. And I'm going to take this column right here times this column. Now, the number argument of round is expecting a single value. And as we've seen many times so far throughout the first 8 videos, anytime you put more than one value into an argument, function argument that's expecting a single value, you're doing a function argument array calculation. But look here, we're doing 2 things. We're actually doing a real live operation, right? So this is a direct math operator calculating on arrays. And then we're going to put the result. If we were to highlight this and hit the F9 key, you can see it's calculating results there. I'm going to Control Z on that. But then that array created by the formula element is being dumped into the number argument. So now we'll just say, hey, comma 2. And if we highlight the round, or we just use our little boop there, F9, you can see now we get our result. Rounded multiplied units times price. Control Z. Now, I'm simply going to utilize the fact that SUMPRODUCT can handle this array calculation and add it without Control Shift Enter. Of course, if we did it this way, it's an extra step we do not need to do. So if you get into a situation, you have a single array that's creating a single array of values that you want to add, you use SUMPRODUCT. All right, so that's what we've been doing so far. But now let's check out and see how to use all these arrays. I'm going to scroll down here. Here's our first example. We want to take and multiply this column times this column, then add. Now, this is a stock example. So here's from past data, we've estimated our return for stock A given different economic states, the probability of these different economic states. So we need to multiply probability times return, probability times return, and then add. So I'm simply going to use SUMPRODUCT. Now we're going to use one array. Now notice when you're using SUMPRODUCT, then you go array times array times array. Each array has to be the same dimension. So this is a dimension of 3 rows by 1 column, comma 3 rows by 1 column. It'll handle this perfectly. Just Control Enter, no Control Shift Enter. So what it did is it took the 2 columns, multiplied, got the result, and then added the sum part, the product part. All right. Now let's go down and learn something important about the sum product. Now here we have the same problem, but notice for stock A in a bad economic state, we don't have any data, right? So we left it blank. We put the word false here. Here we put a 0, and here we put text. These are empty cell, logical, 0, and text. Different data types. So if it's not a numeric value, which in case all of these are, except for that one, it'll treat them as 0. So let's start here. Equals sum product. I'm going to highlight this range, comma this range. It'll just take 0 times 0.5, right? And it gives me 0.3. Now, if I copy this and paste it here because it's a relative cell reference, I'm multiplying these two, and that false is just not going to bother the sum product. This 0, well, of course, that's a number, so it works just fine. Copy, and then here. Even the word none, just like the sum function, the sum product is programmed to ignore the logical and the text value there. All right, let's look at another situation. We talked about how the requirement for using sum product is that the dimensions of the arrays being multiplied and then added must be the same. Well, there's lots of examples where they're not the same. Here's a stock example again, but here we don't have just one stock. We have 1 and 2 stocks. We have our probabilities and then the weight. So I have 0.6 of the portfolio in stock A, 0.4 in stock B. Well, if you do sum product, it's just flat out not going to work. And multiplication can be done in any order. And this won't work. And notice I'm doing the comma to get to the different arguments. It's going to give me a value error. One great solution for this, and often used in stock examples like this, is to forget it. Don't put the different arrays. Let's just do an array calculation, right? We're going to multiply these different ranges here. Now, if I highlight this and hit the F9 key, if you were to do this longhand and calculate each individual return times the probability and the weight, each individual stock return times the probability times the rate, you'd get that resultant array. So Control Z, by using multiply here and only using a single array, I can get around that requirement. Now, there is a drawback to this. Control C, Control V. Remember, we're doing a direct operation here. And we haven't seen this yet, but this is common sense. You can't take the word red and multiply it by 4. So when you're doing math operations like we are here, you can't take a word times a number. It flat out gives you a value error, and you're just not allowed to do that. In a later video, we'll learn about the mult function, and we'll see a way to get around this. So I'm going to hit Enter. But in most cases, you don't have text there, right? And so this method of using multiplication symbol to get around the requirement for same size dimensions is great. Now let's scroll down and talk about perhaps the most famous use for sum product. In Excel 2003 and earlier, there just flat out was no such thing as the SUMPRODUCT with an S, or there was no COUNTIFS with an S. And so what did you do if you needed to sum or count when you had more than one criteria? Of course, there was SUMIF and COUNTIF, but those functions without the S only could add or count with one criteria. So sum product came to the rescue. Now check this out. We have two criteria, KIP and project 2. So if we look through here, our goal is to find all the KIPs and then either count or add. Well, we can see that project 2, that eliminates this one right here. So whoops, we really want to add 15.7 and 15.2. Sum product is perfect for this. Now remember, what does sum product do? It takes arrays and multiplies them. Well, if we could somehow get true for KIP and true for project 2, and then have that trigger this number right here, we could actually multiply a series of trues and falses times another series of trues and falses times these numbers. And only when it was true, true times a number would we get that number to add. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Now we're going to take 3 arrays, one to figure out where the KIPs are, one to figure out where the projects are, and then the numbers. All right. array number 1. Now we could just go and equal sign comparative operator, or any of those equal to kip. Now I'm going to highlight this and hit the F9. Absolutely beautiful. And we've seen this a few times already in this series here. But the problem is SUMPRODUCT can't understand trues and falses. So we need to convert these to ones and zeros. Now there's a bunch of ways we can do this. Anytime you do any math operation on a true or false, it converts it to a 1 or 0. True is 1, false is 0. But here's the deal. Since we can choose amongst our different math operations, there's one operation that's faster calculating than all the rest. And we actually will look at some timed results in video number 14, where we look at Boolean logic, and we'll actually time a bunch of formulas. Here I'm just going to tell you which one it is. It is double negative. Now, check this out. If you put double negative like that and highlight this, or click your little boop, and hit the F9 key, value error, huh? What's going on here? You got to remember your order of operations. The equal sign is way at the bottom of either what we call order of operations or order of precedence. And we talked about that back in video number 1 and a few other times so far. So we need to force this equal sign to happen first, so you have to put it in parentheses. And now, if we were to calculate, it gets trues and falses on the inside, Control Z, and then it takes the double negative, which is the fastest calculating, because we could easily multiply this array by 1 or divide by 1 or add 0. But double negative, and we'll look at the some timing results for that later, is the fastest calculating. It also binds more closely because it happens at the very top. Negation, we talked about this in video number 1, happens at the very top or near the top of the order of precedence in the way Excel calculates. So there it is. Now we could take this array times the array of ones and zeros we calculate for this times that. Control Z. All right, so there's an array, comma, double negative, open parentheses. We'll just have to take it on faith that this is fastest. For now, again, later we'll look at that. And if we highlight this and hit the F9, you can see, oh, OK, that gives me a ones and zeros. It's only when there's a 1 times a 1, that's our second array, times a number, will we get our result. Now, I'm going to close parentheses, and there it is. There's the world famous SUMPRODUCT for adding with 2 conditions. And there we have 3009. Now, in earlier versions, you could have installed the sum wizard. And it would build a formula like this, sum, and then 2 ifs in a row. And we've already seen in earlier videos how we can do that. But this has 2 ifs. Now, if you string 2 ifs together, this is AND criteria. That means it has to get a true here and a true here to calculate the number here. The problem with this is it's a little bit slower calculate than the SUMPRODUCT with double negatives. Now we want to come down and take a look at these calculating notes. And if you haven't noticed so far, there's always calculation notes, at least up through video 15 of all the formulas. And if you read through these, this is probably the best part of this whole package here. Let's go down because the description really breaks down each array formula and shows how it's working. But the important part here we want to look at is when SUMPRODUCT sees an array of ones and zeros, another array of ones and zeros, an array of the numbers. This formula is for adding with 2 criteria. It's only when it sees a 1, which means kip, times a 1, which means project 2, times the number, will it then get that 15.7 in the resultant array and add it. Right? All these zeros times ones times numbers, they're all, anytime it sees a false anywhere, it's going to result in the resultant array with a 0. That means there has to be 2 trues. This is an AND criteria, right? We have to have kip and project 2 to get the number in order for adding, right? So that is explicitly showing you what the result of that trues and falses and double negatives multiplying the arrays, SUMPRODUCT does its magic, right? Same sized dimensioned arrays. We get this resultant array. And finally, then it does the sum part, adds it, right? So the product part multiplies the array. The sum part adds. All right, now I want to go back up here and look at this. This is the SumWizard double if, and this is the SUMPRODUCT with double negative. Now, this is the first point in the video, video number 9. From this point forward, we're going to look at some timing results. And I'll always have notes down here. See timing workbook, add with 2 criteria.xlsm. So I'm going to go over to my Windows Explorer. When you on the DVD, or if you download this, there'll be a zipped folder. Or on the DVD, it'll just be the folder timing formulas. And you can come in here, and as we go forward from video 9 to 24, 25, how many videos there are, we'll come here and look occasionally. I'm going to open this add with 2 criteria. Oops, I am going to Control O. I have 2 versions of Excel running, so it didn't let me use Windows Explorer. I'm going to go to timing formulas. Add with 2 criteria. Now, what I did is I simply added a data set here, Control down arrow. So this has about 12,000 records. Later, we'll look at some even larger data sets. There's the SUMPRODUCT. There's the SumWizard 2 criteria adding. I went ahead and timed each formula 4 times and took the average. Now, you can see visually there's not a much difference, but that's about a 14, 15% decrease. So from the sum if to using SUMPRODUCT. So sometimes in large spreadsheets with lots of formulas that have lots of cell references and calculations, that kind of reduction in calculation time by using the double negative and SUMPRODUCT can really help. Now, how did I do this? How did I time? There's an amazing Excel MVP, Charles Williams, and he has a great website, and he has written white papers for about speeding up spreadsheets, and they're posted at the Microsoft site. Here's his website, absolutely amazing. All sorts of ways to speed up your spreadsheets. And here is a link to not only the code that you can download. It's VBA, so you have to figure out how to do that. But the article says how to do that. But this article is amazing. I learned more from this article about how to speed up spreadsheet calculation time than any other source. Just amazing. All right, there is a caveat, though. Whenever you're doing this, here I've done a double negative and a SumWizard double if. Now, I can't just flat out say that every time double negative is going to be about 15%, right? It's totally dependent on your situation. So when timing formulas, it depends on the exact functions and construction of the formulas. If you're concerned about slow calculation time, it pays to time different methods for your particular situation. All right, I'm going to close this workbook. We'll see a bunch of other examples of comparing and contrasting different formulas to see which one calculate faster. Now, one other last note before we move on to our next amazing example. Last example, I showed you how to multiply. You actually could take this and flat out, instead of having all these double negatives in 3 arrays, right? You could simply multiply these. Remember what we said. Any math operation will convert trues and falses to ones and zeros. So that would give me the right answer here. But later in video number 14, when we look at Boolean logic and we do a bunch of timing of all the math operators, we'll see that this one is even, for the example I do, longer than the sum if. All right, now let's go look at our next example. Now, our next example will actually give us a chance to compare and contrast formulas. Now, point number 10 in this video, don't overuse SUMPRODUCT function when other functions may be more efficient. Of course, this may require timing. So we're going to set up a problem here and then do 4 different solutions and then time them in our large workbook. Now, here's our goal here. We want to count transactions in the year 2012 given a column of serial number dates. That means we have a criterion mismatch problem. We're going to see 4 methods here. Here's our column. As we know, if I Ctrl Shift tilde, which is the keyboard shortcut for general number format, we know that these are serial numbers. Control Z. That allows us to do date math, of course. Control Z. Those are integers. And we want to match criteria, right? So the formatting part of this makes it look, the number formatting makes it look like we have 2012. You know, sometimes you see formulas where people try to take the right 4 of this, and of course that's not going to work. All right, 4 methods. Well, a great method and the fastest calculating one is to add a helper column. We've talked about helper columns a bunch so far in the videos, and we'll talk a lot more basically to the very last video, because helper columns are awesome, especially when you have large formulas with lots of cell references and calculations. I'm just going to use the year function. Year function, look at the name of the argument. It says serial number. That's what it's expecting, and it looks at it, and it knows how to tell you what year. Double click and send it down. Now what do? I use a straight COUNTIF. Now this method will work in pretty much any version, right? Our range with our criteria, our helper column, comma, and there we go. Now we'll look at our timing workbook years timing in just a moment. But this method is the fastest calculating of all. It requires a helper column. That's not always possible. Sometimes you're just flat out not allowed to add extra columns to your data set, and this will work in any version. Now let's look at method 2. This is a great method, but it requires that you have 2007, 10, or 13. Now, 2007 came out. I'm shooting this in right at the end of 2012, almost 2013. So that's a lot of years ago. That's almost 6 years ago. So hopefully in the next year or two, everyone will have COUNTIFs, right? And there's a great solution that beats SUMPRODUCT, right? And doesn't require a helper column. Now we'll look at the SUMPRODUCT version because that actually has some applications. But in 2007 and later, and you can't have a helper column, this method rocks. Now criteria range. Well, guess what? I'm going to highlight this, comma, and criteria. Oh, it's given me a year, but I can construct the first day of the year and the second day of the year. And I can say, please go and look through this column and count the ones that are greater than or equal to 1/1/2012 and less than or equal to 12/31/2012. So I'm going to, in double quote, say 1/1/ in double quote. Now that's a little text string, and I need to join it to, boom. If I highlight this right here and hit the F9 key, boom, it gives me the date. Now that's not quite right because it doesn't have the greater than or equal to, but no problem. Now I'm going to come to the beginning here and greater than or equal to, because this is the first date. I highlight this and then the F9, and boom, there's my first criteria, Control Z. All right, comma, and I highlight the dates again. And then for the final one, I say less than or equal to 12/31/ close parentheses, and then the join symbol. Absolutely awesome. Now I'm going to go ahead and right here click on this, boop, hit the F9 key, and you can see that will work just fine. Control Enter. There's no helper column, but it does require that you have 2007 or later. All right, now let's look at our next method, and this is for SUMPRODUCT. If you don't have 2007 or later, and you can't have a helper column, this will work just fine. Not only that, but we'll see another advantage that SUMPRODUCT has in a couple examples ahead. All right, I'm going to double negative, open parentheses, and guess what? I'm going to use year. Highlight the whole column. Now check this out. We've seen this a bunch of times. That serial number is expecting a single number. I'm giving it a bunch, but we know this is just a function argument array calculation. So when I highlight the year, hit the F9 key, I can see it took those serial numbers and gave me the helper column right in my formula, Control Z. Is anything in that helper column equal to that right there? That'll give me a bunch of trues and falses. F9, Control Z. Now I need to convert the trues and falses with double negative. That formula is awesome. Gives me 2. All right, the final example that you might consider equals sum, and then we could just do an if construction. And then in the logical test, we're just going to do our year. I'm going to say, is anything in there? Remember, year is going to artificially create our helper column right in our formula, right? So that'll give me a bunch of trues and falses. Of course, the if function can handle those trues and falses. So what do I want if I see a true, comma, 1? Otherwise, I can leave this one off. It'll put a false in, no problem. It'll just put a 1. Now let's go and where it sees that particular year. Now let's just highlight this and hit the F9 key. 1, false, false, 1, false. Absolutely beautiful. Ctrl Shift and Enter. Now I can see my curly brackets. And there you go. Now let's go over to this workbook. And again, let me show you something over here. I don't think I've shown you this yet. The timing sheet. We're going to time all sorts of stuff as we move forward. We already saw just a little bit ago that video example. There's the workbook name. There's the sheet. Now we're going to look for timing for examples 10 to 15. We're going to look in the yearbook years, timing, and on the sheet count. So I'm going to go back over here. Control O, it's the timing formulas folder, and inside there we need years timing. So I open this up. It's pretty big. So I've just gone ahead and timed. All right, so we see for the COUNTIF helper, we got 0.018. And then for the COUNTIFs, we got 0.031. So this is the fastest one if you can't use a helper column. And then SUMIF got about 4.8. And these are basically tied in the sum product year. Remember, in your particular situation, you should time your own formulas. These are the results I got here. Excel MVP Charles Williams has a great website, and that's the link for the code so you can get the timer. All right, we're going to close this workbook. And we want to talk about a great advantage for SUMPRODUCT with this same calculation. Now, SUMPRODUCT can handle external references when the external workbook is closed, but COUNTIFs, COUNTIF, SUMIFs, and all those similar functions cannot. Now look at this. The same formula I did earlier. We have the year with double negative and all that. I just have an external range here. SUMPRODUCT can count. And we'll open up that workbook in just a second. But look, the COUNTIF with the helper column, it's got that same external link. And the COUNTIFs, flat out, they're not going to work. And the workbook that these two formulas are looking at is closed. But let's go ahead and open it. I'm going to Control O. And this file will come with the DVD or any downloaded location. I'm going to open up Dates, External Data. So here is the workbook. Now we're going to look at a number of potential solutions here. But this is just a small data set. But you can imagine there's a huge column with dates. I'm going to Control Tab. Oh, look at that. Whoops. Now that it's open, all of these formulas work, right? But the SUMPRODUCT will work whether it's open or closed. The COUNTIF will not. The COUNTIFs will not. Now let's go look at this workbook. There's another great solution. Again, I'm showing you the helper column solution. This one's for the COUNTIF. Sometimes people like to do that. Sometimes if you can't have that external helper column over there, then of course something like this will work. But let's go. There's another option also. Now notice I've done the COUNTIF function here. Now of course this one is even more limited in its application. But if you could do this, that certainly is a workaround for counting how many 2012s there are, right? The criteria is over here, so that's pretty limited. But now let's close this. And of course, when I open and close this workbook or put it in edit mode or whatever, these turn to value errors because they just can't, they flat out cannot see that closed workbook. But SUMPRODUCT can. And look at that one. All that is just a cell reference pointing to the COUNTIF formula over in the closed workbook. So if you have the COUNTIF over in the closed workbook, that's fine. So SUMPRODUCT, that's a great use for this particular situation. Now examples 10 to 16, we saw how to take year criteria and that was mismatched against serial numbers and count, right? Point 17 here, the 8 methods. Now we only looked at the first 5. There's filter, Excel table, and pivot table. But here are methods with a couple short notes for you so you can compare and contrast. Now, think about this. Examples 10 to 16, we were comparing the sum product to other functions. In our next example, we want to talk about what do we do when we actually have, where we've decided to use sum product. Are there functions within the sum product that are making the array calculations that might be more efficient than, say, some other functions? Now, here's our goal here. We have two criteria with a mismatch. We have serial numbers again, right? But we're given criteria, year, and text, 3 character abbreviations for month. How in the world can we deal with this? Well, let's look at a few ways. One great way is I want to talk about the text function. Now, text function requires that you know something about custom number formatting. I want to show you a trick here. I'm going to highlight those dates with number formatting and Control 1. That's the keyboard shortcut for the Format Cells dialog box. Go to Number. Anytime you select any one of these built-in number formattings, if you go down to Custom, it'll show you in the Type box what the custom number formatting is. Now, date is a great one to learn a little bit about custom number formatting. Remember, that's just number formatting that sample. That serial number sitting in the cell over there. Let's highlight this. Remember, we're in custom type, and just type day, or D. Oh, D, D. Whoa, D. The different Ds, 1 and 2 shows you the two numbers. 3 Ds show you the abbreviation, and 4 shows you the full spelled out name. Now, that word Saturday is not in the cell. It's simply number formatting. Can we do the same thing for month? Month. Now, a single M, obviously going to show 2 characters when there is 2 digits. If there's a single, it'll just show single. 2 M's, it'll have a lead 0 if it's a single digit. Now, watch this. There's our trick. That's number formatting. Finally, M would give us that. All right, let's just see what happens if we M, and then year, year. Now, 3 years will show you the full 4 number digits for the year. Now, that's clever. We can, with number formatting, make something appear like a word and a number. I'm going to click OK. Now remember, that's not what's in the cell. That's just on the surface. That's the facade. I'm going to Control Z. It's important that we know how to use custom number format if we're going to consider the text function. Remember, mismatch this criteria. So the and how are we going to, from serial numbers, match it against here? No problem, the text. That value argument's expecting a single value. We're going to give it a bunch. Comma. Format text in double quotes. I'm going to put MMM, year, year, year. Close double quotes on the custom number format. Close parentheses. Now I'm going to highlight this and hit the F9 key. And sure enough, from serial numbers, we have coaxed something we can match against our criteria. Control Z. Now I simply convert that from a bunch of text. And I say, is that equal to, and join symbol, Shift 7, that ampersand. And now I have created some criteria that I can match from 2 separate cells. F9, beautiful. Highlight the whole thing in F9. There's our true and falses. Now remember, if we're counting, we need to convert those trues and falses to 1s and 0s, double negative, open parentheses. I'm going to put an extra close parentheses and then come to the front and type sum product. So there we have it. The internal part, if I click there and hit F9, 3, count them 3. There's 3 transactions in October 2012. Control Z. Now, one drawback of the text function is that it's very calculation intensive. So that can be a problem. But it's convenient because custom number formatting for dates is not too hard to remember, and it's a clever way of doing this. I'm going to hit the F4 key here because I forgot to lock that. I'm going to Control Enter and double click and send it down. Now, this is a single function inside of SUMPRODUCT. This next example is going to be 4 different functions all doing something similar, but it turns out that it's a lot faster calculating. So you just never know. All right, I'm going to start with equals month. And I'm going to highlight this whole column here. Now, month just tells you a number. So I'm going to highlight this and hit the F9. It just gives you the number, right? Control Z. I'm going to join that to year. So now that's kind of crazy. I've joined two arrays. Remember, this is a function argument array calculation. So is this. And then we have a third array calculation here, the join operation. So I'm going to hit the F9. So now I have something I can match. Well, almost. Wait a second. 10? We can't match 10 against October. But here's a great trick. Equals, and I'm going to take the month. Moth. There's no moth function. So the month function. And here's a great trick. If I take this and close parentheses and highlight it, F9, it gives me a value error because it doesn't understand OCT. But I can trick it by taking the number 1 and joining it. Now what it's done is it's still going to create some text if I F9 it. But the month function can understand 1 October. Control Z. So now if I highlight this and hit the F9 key, it sees the 10. All right, and so I have month and year. So now I just need to join this to the year. So now if I highlight the criteria, remember, two sets of criteria concatenated into one, F9, boom, there I have it. I can match it against there. Now earlier we did join like this, and we said be sure to put a character between. You can do that here. In this case, if you look at this formula, it's not going to cause any trouble at all. I'm going to hit highlight the whole thing in F9. So there's my trues and falses. Now look at that, 4 functions, but no problem. It will calculate faster. We'll go look at our timing results in just a moment. Now I'm going to have to convert those to ones and zeros and put a sum product around it. Control, oops, I forgot. Lock it. So I'm going to highlight that little colon and hit the F4 key. The colon and hit the F4 key. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now those are all nice and beautiful. If you had external references or you had your heart set on some product, this is a lot faster calculating. But notice how counterintuitive that is. Now this example here is really about comparing functions inside the sum product. So we'll do the year and month and text, and we'll see the timing results in just a second. But I want to show you COUNTIFs and end of month. And again, this will work in 2007 or later. And I'm going to show you this because it's a lot faster calculating. Now, why are we always talking about calculation time for array formulas? Because array formulas flat out can get huge. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're simulating helper columns inside of single cell formulas. So you always want to try and consider calculation time. All right, let's look at this great solution here. Now, again, we have this mismatch. But I'm going to do COUNTIFs, and I'm going to create the first of the month and the end of the month, and then say greater than or equal to the first, less than or equal to the end. Now, the trick here will be that the end of the month for different months is tricky, right? Because not every month has the same number of days. All right, I'm going to type equals COUNTIFs. And I'm going to have my criteria range. These are serial numbers. And I'm going to hit the F4 key. And then the first criteria. Well, we can simply, for the first of the month, each month has the same first. It's the first. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to 1. And now, whoops, I'm going to put that in double quotes. And I'm going to join that using Shift 7 ampersand to the month, and join it to the year. So this little piece right here, if I hit F9, it's going to give us 1 October 2012 with a greater than or equal to comparative operator. No problem. COUNTIFs will interpret that as a date and a comparative operator. Control Z. All right, so then comma, we do our criteria range 2. F4. And now this is going to be awesome. We're going to use the end of month. Now this is in 2007 and later in earlier versions. Well, you wouldn't be using this formula in earlier versions. But end of month was available through the analysis tool pack and add-ins under tools. All right, so I'm going to do end of month. Now what does end of month do? Well, you give it a start date, and we're going to give it the first of the month. and it will calculate the end of month for this month, next month, last month. So the start date, I'm going to do my same little trick. In double quotes, oh, I'm sorry, not double quotes because I only have a 1. So 1 ampersand October ampersand 2012. Now when I highlight this and hit the F9 key, it's that date as text, but no problem. It'll interpret it fine. This start date argument, comma. Now months, if you want this month, you put a 0. If you wanted next month, you put a 1. If you wanted last month, you put -1. We, of course, want this month, so a 0. Now this will just give me the date, and watch this, F9. It gives me a serial number. Control Z, and I simply join that in double quotes, less than or equal to in double quotes ampersand. Now check this out. This is strange that this even works, but it does work. F9, well, that's text, but COUNTIFs will interpret it as a serial number, and it'll work fine. And then, of course, we just saw that that is a serial number. And that formula will work. Control Enter. There's no array calculations there, right? Gives us the same answer. Now, let's go look at this workbook, years timing. Control O. And again, it's going to be in your DVD, the timing formula. Years timing, and we're going to the sheet month and year. So I have the text, the sum product with 3 functions, and this COUNTIF. So it takes 0.024 about, or 0.5, and then it jumps all the way up for the year month one to 0.08, and then all the way up to 0.14. Now again, this timer comes from Excel MVP Charles Williams. Absolutely amazing website he has. And here's the code if you want to download the timer. Because it's always, even though I have some results here, your particular situation will vary. So if you're concerned about calculation speed, download this code. And this article that goes along with the code is just amazing. So you should go read it anyway. All right, I'm going to close this. Now let's scroll down. That's example 18 and 19. 20 is just reminding you, here's the array formula, rule 16. Selecting most efficient functions for array formulas can reduce calculation time. And again, these blue array formula rules as we go along are all summarized on sheet 15. So you should go read these. This is a list of all of these array formula rules, including examples, right? So if I go down to 16 right here, it says video 9, example 18. That's just the one we were on. All right, one last important thing about SUMPRODUCT. Now, we're using SUMPRODUCT, or we have used SUMPRODUCT to avoid using Ctrl Shift Enter. Now, most of the time that works, but there are a few functions that will trump the SUMPRODUCT. Here's an example. If you have the if function, anytime you put an array operation into the logical test argument, no matter how hard you try, if you put it inside the sum product, it will still require Control Shift Enter. So let's try this. Let's just say, you all the time hit Enter and get implicit intersection, or if you hit Enter and the formula is not next to the data set, then you get a value error, and you're just tired of it, and you're saying like, well, shoot, I'm just going to take this calculation, because Max is just delivering a single number. Why don't I just put it in SUMPRODUCT? SUMPRODUCT will take that one number and display it. So I'm going to copy it and come down here and try to use SUMPRODUCT, because I know that argument can handle array calculations. I'm going to put it there and hit Enter. No. The fact that we've put an array calculation into the logical test argument of the if trumps this argument's requirement to not use Control Shift Enter. So that's very important. Now we'll see another really important example in video 18, example 2. But there it is. You can't use SUMPRODUCT. Guess what? Sometimes you'll see people put it here, and then they're like Control Shift Enter, because of course it will work with it when I Control Shift Enter, just like it did up here. The problem with that is somebody looking at this might think, oh, he used SUMPRODUCT, so it doesn't require Control Shift Enter. So A, you can't use sum product with the if function to avoid Control Shift Enter. And B, don't bother using Control Shift Enter because it might confuse something. It's ambiguous, right? I see the sum product up here, and so I might think it's going to be entered without Control Shift Enter. All right, so I would never do that formula right there. Oh, wow. Video number 9, I'm going to control home. That is a lot about the sum product. And guess what? We're going to use almost all this knowledge. This was like the nuts and bolts of sum product. We will see throughout the rest of the about 15 videos, we'll use the sum product all over the place because it's a very useful function. Hey, in our next video, number 10, we'll see the lookup function, which also similar to sum product, does not require Control Shift Enter when making an array calculation. All right, we'll see you next video.